Hello, everyone. We're here to read Chapter 14 of Operation Redwood, titled The Vow of Silence. I'll do my best to read this clearly and carefully without making mistakes. Forgive me if I make any. I know I made a couple in the last chapter, so just do your best to read the exact words on the page, and I will too. All right. As Daphne's tirade in the car went on and on, Julian pretended he was a secret agent who had been captured by the enemy. His mission? To determine how much Danny had revealed. He didn't know when they'd have a chance to talk, and he wanted their stories to match. Fortunately, the enemy was more interested in complaining about her ruined day than interrogating him. From what Julian could gather, Daphne and Sibley were still in the dark about two key facts. First, that he'd opened his uncle's emails, and second, that Robin's family was connected in any way to the IPX property. Eventually, Daphne grew tired of craning her neck over her shoulders to make sure that Julian was still listening. Her performance at Huckleberry Ranch had drained her energy. So he uses the word performance to talk about her angry tantrum with the elders. She ordered Sergei to find the nearest latte, then spent the next hour rehashing the story of Julian's rescue on her cell phone. After she had repeated the story 4 or 5 times, Daphne called the housekeeper and instructed her to remove the phone and television from Julian's room. When they finally reached San Francisco, Julian was sent straight upstairs and told to stay in his room until further notice. His bedroom had been stripped bare. There wasn't even a pencil. He sat by the window and listened to the sounds of the house, the garage door opening, the muffled roar of the vacuum cleaner, the click of Daphne's high heels. Outside, the foghorn sounded its low, rhythmic honk. The gray fog completely hid the Golden Gate Bridge and was so dense that it was impossible to gauge the time of day. When the streetlights came on, Julian jumped. It was hard to believe that the summer sun was setting far away at Huckleberry Ranch. Julian stood for a long time, staring at the drifting fog. Had it been worth it? He asked himself. He was in disgrace, but with his aunt and uncle, that was nothing new. If he hadn't opened Robin's message, he would never have gone to Huckleberry Ranch, and he would have missed out on the best weeks of his life. He hadn't known that such a world existed. He wondered what Robin and her family were doing right now. No doubt Robin was in trouble. Daphne might not have made the connection between his running away and Big Tree Grove, at least not yet. Bob and Nancy, however, certainly wouldn't think it was just a coincidence that he was Sibley Carter's nephew. What would Robin tell them? Would she reveal her secret email to his uncle? Or make up some story somehow, putting the blame on Julian? She might as well, he thought bitterly. He'd probably never see any of them again. There was a timid knock on the door. Julian opened it, and Preston looked quickly down the hall and slipped inside. He was dressed in his plaid bathrobe and slippers and was holding a paper napkin and 2 pieces of cheese pizza on the paper plate. Julian, he said, his face bright with pleasure. I saved 2 pieces for you. They're still kind of warm even. Thanks. You're a good cousin. You're the best one I've got. It was an old joke. He was starving. He hadn't eaten anything since breakfast. Preston sat down cross-legged on his bed. I can only stay a minute because I'm not allowed to be in here. Mom went out. Helga's on the phone with her boyfriend. Julian nodded. They could have given him 10, they should have, let's try that sentence again. Julian nodded. That should give them 10 minutes at least. He sat down and began to devour the pizza. So, where did you go? Julian sat for a moment, chewing. Well, I went to visit a friend of mine. Who? Danny? Julian smiled. Preston had only met Danny twice, but he adored him and was always talking about him. No, a girl named Robin. She lives kind of far away from here, he said between bites. How did you get there? Did you take an airplane? No, Julian said with regret. It wasn't fair that he'd never been in an airplane, and Preston had practically flown around the world. A bus. Not like a city bus, a bus that goes to different towns. But why didn't you go to camp? I went to camp last summer and it was really fun. Well, Julian hesitated. I wanted to see my friend, and I guess it wasn't really the right camp for me. Preston shook his head. Mom and Dad were really mad. When they found out, I don't think it was a very good idea. Maybe you're right, Julian finished the crust of the pizza and wiped his hands on the napkin. So, what have you been up to? Did you finish your Redwood report? Preston nodded. I got a 5 plus out of 5. Do you want to see it? Of course. I'll see what Helga's doing, then I'll come back. He leaped to his feet. If I can, he added seriously. He took the greasy paper plate and napkin, opened the door, and looked both ways. Then he scurried in his silent slippers down the hallway. A few minutes later, Preston was back, carrying an enormous poster. In the center, he had drawn the outline of a giant redwood tree with crayon and painted it with watercolors. Around the tree were circles of colored construction paper printed with Preston's neat handwriting. We had to have 8 facts and 2 opinions, Preston said with pride. I did a sloppy copy, and then I did the final draft. Julian knew how long it took Preston to write a single sentence. He must have spent hours putting the poster together. See, here's fact number 1, Preston said. More than 95% of the original redwood forest has been cut down. Next to this, he had drawn a picture of 19 stumps and 1 tree. Because 95% is the same as 19 out of 20, he explained. My teacher helped me figure that out. Fact number 2. The oldest recorded redwood tree is more than 2,200 years old, but the species, Sequoia sempervirens, I don't know if I'm saying it right, has existed for millions of years. I drew a dinosaur here because there were redwoods during the time of the dinosaurs. Fact number 3. The tallest redwood tree is 379 feet high. I didn't need to draw a little picture here. See, I just drew a ruler along the big tree. Fact number 4. Redwood trees provide shade and protection for Chinook and coho salmon streams. This is my best picture. Well, maybe after the big redwood. The salmon had each scale drawn in pencil and colored with blue and green watercolors. The scales looked watery and shimmery. That is a work of art, Julian said. You'll have to show me how to make a fish like that. I messed up on the green, so I put the blue on top. And see, it turned out great, Julian said happily. Okay, here's my first opinion. Well, it's not exactly an opinion. It's more like a wish, but my teacher said it was okay. I wish I could live in a redwood forest. Julian thought of Big Tree with a sudden pang. I'd like to live in a redwood tree. Oh, that would be even cooler, like a treehouse. I didn't think of that. Well, actually, I kind of have something about that later. You'll see. Okay, here's fact number 5. Some animals that live in the redwood forests are salamanders, banana slugs, spotted owls, marbled murrelets, elk, deer, flying squirrels, fishers, and bats. A fisher is actually not a fish like I thought. It's cute, like an otter. See, here's my flying squirrel. It didn't really turn out. Julian had to admit that it looked a little like a rat. But squirrels and rats are both in the rodent family, he added gently. Fact number 6. In 1999, the government protected thousands of acres of land in Humboldt County in the Headwaters deal. It is mostly old growth, which means trees were not planted by people, but have been there a long time. I didn't know what to draw for this one, Preston said. You see, finally I decided to draw this girl on the top of the tree. I can't remember her name, but she lived in a tree for 2 years to keep them from cutting it down, and after that, they saved the headwaters. Julia Butterfly Hill? Julian asked, and Preston nodded. Julian wondered why it was that as soon as he learned something new, he would suddenly realize that everybody else already knew it. He'd asked Danny if he knew who Julia Butterfly Hill was. Fact number 7, Preston was saying, is here. Trees are measured in board feet. One foot equals a piece of wood 1 foot long, 1 foot wide, and 1 inch thick. Next to this fact, he'd drawn a little wooden board with 2 tiny rulers along each side. I like your knothole, Julian said. Here's my last fact. One old-growth redwood tree can be worth $150,000. My dad told me that one. You were allowed to interview people, and my teacher said he counted. The last picture showed a tree with a $150,000 price tag attached. Here's my last opinion. If I had $1 million, I would buy 6 redwood trees so that nobody could cut them down. You see, I had to figure out the math. My teacher helped me because I was trying to figure out how many redwood trees I could buy with $1 million. I thought it would be a lot, but it turned out it was only 6, plus a remainder, which isn't that many. Julian wished he could tell Preston about Big Tree Grove and the treehouse, but it was too risky. Instead, he said, "You did a great job on your poster. It's amazing. It looks like a fifth grader did it." Preston flushed with pleasure. "Now you better get out of here," Julian said reluctantly. "I'm already in enough trouble for the both of us." Julian woke up the next day with a curious, empty feeling. A morning of waiting turned into an afternoon of waiting, which turned into a blank, dull evening. His meals were brought to him on a tray by the housekeeper, and he was permitted to leave his room only to go to the bathroom. He was tempted to use his pocket knife to carve his initials into the baseboard, like the immigrant prisoners on Angel Island, but he was sure that not even the tiniest defacement would escape Daphne's eagle eyes. Even after spending a whole day alone, Julian began to feel as though he didn't even exist. He began to understand why solitary confinement was considered a punishment, even for people who were already in prison. As soon as it was dark, Julian tried to go to sleep, but since he'd spent the whole day doing nothing, he wasn't at all tired, and he tossed and turned for what felt like hours before finally drifting into sleep. He woke up feeling heavy and groggy and unsettled. Julian had finished the cereal from his breakfast tray and was drinking his orange juice as slowly as possible when he heard a quick knock. Immediately, his uncle walked in and sat down on the wooden chair across from his bed. "Good morning, Julian." As always, Sibley's hair was neatly parted on the side, and his steely eyes were humorless. "Good morning." Julian's voice was rusty with disuse. "You've had time now to think about what you've done," his uncle said. "I have several issues to discuss with you. First, your behavior has been inexcusable. We gave you a good home for 2 months. Daphne went out of her way to arrange your summer vacation. And how do you pay us back? By running away, by disrupting our entire household. You have no idea the trouble you caused your little escapade has caused." I did a bad job with that. "You have no idea the trouble your little escapade caused." Julian waited silently for him to finish. "We're trying to contact your mother. Given your behavior, we think it's best that she return immediately." It hadn't occurred to Julian that his mother might have to cut short her trip to China. He lowered his gaze and shifted uneasily. "I would also like some explanation for your behavior. Why would you go up to that place? Were those people friends of your mother's? What were you thinking?" Sibley stopped, waiting for a response while Julian stared at a hole in his blue jeans. Was his uncle trying to trap him? Or is it possible that he hadn't yet made the connection between Big Tree Grove and the elders? Either way, Julian could see no advantage in telling his uncle the truth about his escape. The intercepted emails, Danny's inspired invention of the plan, all the plotting they had done to make it work. These were all wrapped together in his mind with his days at Huckleberry Ranch. Those were things to keep close to the heart. On the other hand, he didn't have the energy or the wits to come up with another plausible explanation for his actions. If there was one thing he'd learned, it was that plans did not always work out exactly as you'd imagined. Whatever story he made up, Sibley could double check by interrogating Danny, or worse, contacting the elders. To speak the truth was impossible. To disguise the truth under a new web of lies would just lead him back in a circle to where he was now. Julian said nothing. His uncle waited a long time, until the silence became almost unbearable. Finally, very slowly, and without ever dropping his gaze from Julian's face, he said, "Julian, I asked you a question. I would like an explanation of what's going on here." A strange calm came over Julian. His uncle's pale eyes were boring into him as if he were trying to access the data hidden in his mind, but Julian felt cool and detached. For the first time, for the last time, Julian, his uncle said, "Answer me." Julian felt like he was floating high above the room. He saw that, really, his uncle's anger was not so important. It was not as important as Big Tree Grove. The circle of redwoods was still there, hidden deep in the forest, cool and shady and quiet. It would be there long after his uncle's anger had died away. Or it should be. It should be there forever. Sibley stood up. "I'm sorry that you have made this decision, Julian. I don't have to tell you that there are going to be consequences, serious consequences. He stared at Julian for a long time, shook his head, and walked out, closing the door angrily behind him.